going.
Awesome. Now I know that. You're in charge. Okay, for today's class, we're going to talk about faithful finances. And what I hope to accomplish today is to help you guys understand the way the Scripture approaches things like finances and money. So, to begin with, let's ask this question. What is money?
Currency.
Currency, okay, that's one example. What else?
It's like given distinct value for trade.
Okay, value for trade.
How is that different?
Okay, so for example, gold, is it money?
No.
Not unless it's given value.
So from an economic standpoint, keep in mind, my background is economics. I have a couple of degrees in economics. So money is a means of exchange or a representation of value. That's the two technical definitions for money. Now, there are two historical models of economics. One is a barter system in which I have something that you want, and we determine how many eggs is equal to a pound of meat, or how many gallons of milk is equal to 3 ounces of gold, or whatever else, right? So in a barter economy, the value of everything fluctuates, right? So the thing that I'm trading and the thing that you're trading are constantly fluctuating in value, and the price of something between you and I may be different than the price of something between me and Hugh. In comparison, currency, the word that you use, is the other type of economy. So there's a barter economy and a currency-based economy. Currency-based economy, it uses exclusively representations of value that are stated. $1, $5, $10, $100. And the price of the goods may change in reference to dollars, but the dollars keep a specific value. Does that make sense? So you don't take your $1 bill and scratch out the 1 and write 2 on it because of inflation, right? It's always $1, but the price of the other goods changes, right? So in the case of a barter system, everything moves up and down all the time based on the moment of the transaction. Whereas in a currency-based system, you're saying one thing remains the same and the goods go up and down. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when you say that money is currency, you are accurate in a currency-based system, which is the only way that you've ever known an economy in your life.
So we gave the two different kinds?
More or less.
Okay.
You guys hit both buttons. Less technical definitions, but you did hit both buttons, okay? So, barter economy, you exchange goods for goods. Currency-based economy, you exchange a certain preservation of value or representation of value for goods or services, right? I need somebody to plow my field, I will pay them in grain when it's harvested, that kind of thing, okay? Both are present in the Bible, okay? Quick example from a religious standpoint. Barter-based economy, if you look at the early sacrifices of the patriarchal and Mosaic dispensation, they gave animals, right? Sheep, goats, dove, whatever. They burned grain, they burned oil, right? Barter-based. Had to be a representation of value, but God specified, you're going to give me this much of a bull, or you're going to give me this much flour, or this much grain, whatever, right? Then we went to the time that they built the temple and everyone had to give so much gold. Okay, people had to pay a ransom for themselves, and it was priced in gold, okay, or priced in silver. So we went to a currency-based economy. At least at that time, they took and they weighed out coins. By the way, when they talk about a talent or a shekel or any of those other things, those are generally measures of weight, not value. So when you think of a shekel, don't think of so many dollars. It was so many grams or ounces of gold or silver. Pretty closely measured, but not exact. There's some variance there. But when we talk about the parable of the talents a little bit later today, or when we talk about the ransom paid in shekels in the Old Testament, we're going to talk about weights of those measures and what they meant, what they would be in dollars now. Okay? So, at least at the beginning, what I want you guys to understand is that money is just something that is exchanged. Okay? In a barter system, there is no money. You exchange stuff for stuff. In a currency system, you exchange what we would call money or currency for stuff. All right? That's what we're talking about. Now, have any of you ever heard of this phrase?
Yeah.
Yep.
Time is money. What does that mean?
Need time to make money.
Takes time to make money. Okay.
It means any time that I have doing anything, I could be spending making money.
I could be spending the time that I'm doing something else making money. That's opportunity cost in economics, but yes. But what did we say money was?
Currency.
Currency.
So
Stuff
time is also
exchanged.
currency.
Something exchanged, something of value. So what does this statement actually mean? If time is money, time is, jump over these two words,
My
time is
has
currency,
value.
time is value for trade. Time is something of value. It is a means of exchange.
So it'd
Okay.
be like in the barter system when he traded his time on the harvest. for
Correct.
the grain.
Somebody harvesting in exchange for a portion of the crops.
Yeah.
Which that existed even up in like 19th century United States economy. Sharecropping, for example. Okay? The reason that this
Still exists.
still exists to some extent, sure. People that work and instead of working for so many dollars per hour or what have you, sharing in the produce of their work. Okay? But the reason this is important, and the reason I want y'all to understand this, is this statement is probably the most accurate representation of finances that there is. People always say time is money, and I think people use that phrase and don't know what it really, really means. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about how time is money. If we understand what this phrase right here means, you will have a better understanding of finances through the rest of your life than the average person by far. There are plenty of adults that don't understand the real meaning of this phrase. They may say it, but they don't know what it means. Second of all, it will help you to understand what parts of your life and what things that you have truly have value. Does that make sense? Everybody sticking with me so far?
Mhm.
All right, so I want to talk about a couple of Old Testament examples, and then we'll come back to the time is money thing. Exodus chapter 30. Let's turn there. Exodus 30. I need somebody to read. Let's start in verse 12 right here, Lane. 12, 13, 14, 15. I got 4 of you, so that works out perfect. One verse apiece.
You said Exodus 30 verses
Starting in verse 12,
12.
and then he'll pick up verse 13.
When you take a census of the Israelites to count them, each one must pay the Lord a ransom for his life at the time he is counted. Then no plague will come on them when you number them.
All right, pause there. What are we doing?
Paying money so you don't get plagued.
Paying money so you don't get plagued. Every person is giving a ransom for themselves. Okay? In response to the question in David's census of why God sent a plague, it was because we failed to comply with this specific command in Exodus chapter 30. Okay? But also the thing to understand is that God only commands the people to be numbered a couple of times in the Old Testament, and in response to that numbering, every person had to give a half a shekel. Now, what's shekel?
Measurement.
Weights.
A measurement of weight, a measurement of value, right? There is a specific model being put in place with this, okay? The ransom of a person's life in response to a census is half a shekel, as measured by the temple or tabernacle shekel, okay? Hugh, next verse.
This is what every one among those who are numbered shall give, half a shekel according to the shekel of the sanctuary. A shekel, okay. The half shekel shall be an offering to the Lord.
Megan, 14.
All who cross over those 20 years old or more are to give an offering to the Lord.
The rich are not to give more than half a shekel, and the poor are not to give less when you make the offering to the Lord to atone for your lives.
Okay, what God did right there is God's just saying, we're going to count the people, and here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a specific measurement, and you're going to charge everyone that half a measurement. Everyone over age 20, regardless of how much they have or how little they have, this is the ransom they must acquire for their lives in the case of this census. Okay? Now, the reason I want y'all to understand this is that at the very beginning, God is making, again, we're transitioning away from everyone needs to offer a lamb, everyone needs to offer grain, everyone needs to offer a dove, what have you. This is God requesting a monetary price or currency type exchange. This is the first contribution to the temple. Okay? This is why this is important. Okay? God's making a shift in value and saying, in addition to the physical things that you give me that are sacrifices from your flocks and from your herds and from everything else, I need you to understand that currency belongs to me also. Does that make sense? Okay? So as their economy develops and as their lifestyles change, God demands more of them than just crops and herds. Now, second place I want you to go. Just so you guys are aware, that was the initial census that was taken in Numbers chapter 3, verses 40 and following. We're not going to go read it, but I want you to understand here. God goes back and says, of the firstborn of the children of Israel, they all belong to me, but in exchange, I'm going to take the Levites. So count everyone, and they total them all up, and there were extra people beyond how many Levites there were. So God says, all right, count all the firstborn, and I think it's like there were 2,300 or something. And they counted all the Levites, and there were 2,340 something people. And then they counted all the Levites, there were only 2,300. He said, for the 40 something extra, this is the price that is paid to redeem all of them. Okay? So basically the entire population was redeemed for the cost of Levites plus cash. Okay? That's what this amounts to. It's again, you guys feel free to go read sometime, Numbers chapter 3, verses 40 and following, God exchanging the lives of the Levites, replacing this currency-based census. Okay? God saying the Levites belong to me and everybody else has been bought out. All right, now, there are various costs mentioned in Leviticus chapter 27 for different persons. So a person could have their life pledged to the temple. Remember when Samuel was pledged to the temple as an infant, Hannah says, if you give me a son, I will give him back to you and he'll serve you forever. There's actually a price that can be paid to redeem someone back from service to the temple. And it's different for people between ages 1 month and 5 years, from 5 years to 20 years, from 20 years to 60 years, and 60 years plus. There's a difference between male and female. All of the prices are different, but the prices are based on the age and working ability of the person. And what it is God saying, you know, a 20-year-old guy as a laborer is more valuable than a 60-year-old guy as a laborer. Okay? A 5-year-old girl is different in value from a 1-month-old girl as far as their lifespan is longer, but their laboring value, childbearing value, whatever it might be. And so God places different values, but they're all based on the age of the person and the time that person has left. God is associating the time value of money here. Also, in the case of the census, you had to be how old to be qualified? 20. So it's God putting a line at age 20. I don't know why it's 20. Just the line God put. Okay? Same thing with the people in the wilderness when God says, hey, everybody over age 20 is going to die except for Joshua and Caleb. I don't know why it was 20. Maybe in the Bible times, 20 was the age of adulthood instead of 18. I don't know. Okay? But God looks at the age of a person and he is able to determine their value that way. We'll get a little deeper into that later. Okay? But God is looking at a person's value based on the time that they have left to accomplish something. So even God can look into human beings and say, time's irrelevant to me, but to you it means something. Okay? So, that's something I want you to understand. Last thing, you can go to various examples in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. I'll encourage you guys to go look it up sometime if you want to. But in the case of non-capital offenses, do you know what a capital offense is?
Like punishable by death?
Punishable by death. Capital offense, okay? So death sentence type crimes. In the case of non-capital crimes, a person was required to repay what they had stolen, repay what they had damaged, and then some. So that plus a fifth, or that twice over, or that fourfold. What it is it's what's called punitive damages in our society, which is you're not only going to give back what you caused in damage, but you're going to give back extra because of the pain you put this person through. The time they wasted coming to court and arguing with you about it. The time that was lost because they lost that thing. We call it punitive damages. It existed all the way back in Old Testament law that if you did something that was a non-capital crime, you would have to repay the thing, but also damages on top of that. Okay? Again, it's God showing that time has value. The time that you took away from that person, the value that you took away from that person has a value. It's also meant to show that because of what you did, it's going to cost something from you other than just giving back the person what they lost. Okay? So it's going to cost more of your own time, resources, assets, or money in order to repay that person. Okay? The other thing, and we're going to shift gears just a little bit, we're going to talk about values of money, is that when God puts these things in place, we have to have certain ways that we measure these monies, right? Now, in the case of Exodus, it was the temple or sanctuary shekel. It was about 20 gerahs, which is a whole other measure of money. It's God saying that there are bigger and smaller amounts of money, but this is the standard, right? So there's a couple of words that you guys have heard used in response to money in the New Testament. Those are the two most common things you're going to see in the New Testament. A denarius, or denarii is the plural, or talents. And you've heard talents, right? Now, when we think talents, we try to say, oh, this person has so many talents. They're a speaker, and they can they can play music, and they can run fast or whatever. Those are talents. In the New Testament, when it talks about talents, the parable of the talents, one guy got 5, another guy got 3, another guy got 1. That was an actual measure of money. Okay, and we're going to talk about what those meant too, and then we'll get off into those parables a little later. All right. So, real quick, a denarius was 4.5 grams of silver. A talent was 58.9 kilograms of gold. Okay, these are by weight. Now, these are all based on, yes, measures of weight, but the Bible is also conveniently giving us definitions of those things. So in the case of the workers in the vineyard, everybody agrees to work 1 day for 1 denarii. So we also look at this, and yes, it has this weight measurement, but it's also 1 day's wages for a laborer. Okay? We also know based on history that to get from a denarius to a talent, you needed 6,000 denarii to get to a talent. This is 1 day's wages. This is about 16 and a half years of wages. This is the largest measure of money that they had. So when it talks about a talent, it was a lot of money. And so when it talks about the guy who owed 10,000 talents, in the case of the servant who went to his master and he owed 10,000 talents, the idea of him having 10,000 16-and-a-half-year periods to work this off, because he tells the master, just give me time and I'll repay it all. This lets you understand how ridiculous that was. He would have needed, rough math, 16,000 years to pay this off, all right? It's just not going to happen, right? Like, we can all understand how that doesn't work out. I'm sorry, not 16, 160,000 years to pay this off. It's just not going to happen. It is an impossible debt.
How do you owe that much then?
We'll get to where you wind up owing so much in a minute, okay? We'll get there. But I want you to understand that this number is a relatively small number, 1 day's wages, all right? Now, there's a common refrain that people today don't make enough for a day's wages, so let's put this in dollar terms. 4.5 grams of silver, and I went and looked it up on Saturday. This number changes every day because the value of silver changes every day. But it's about $489. Okay? This one is about 3.3 million. Because gold is so valuable today. Right? So taking that measure of gold, it's worth about $3.3 million. Remember, there was a guy that owed 10,000 of those. That will put that debt into perspective for you in a way that I don't know I could otherwise. Is to explain exactly how much that guy owed. And the idea that he said, just wait and I'll pay it off, would be kind of like you walking in and owing, $3 billion, $3 trillion, saying, just wait, I'll pay it off, don't worry.
That's like Elon Musk's budget. Right?
No. Elon Musk doesn't even have that kind of money. Okay? Most countries don't have that kind of money. Okay? $3.5 trillion, right? That
No.
our government doesn't spend that much money in a normal year. Okay? So, having said that, this gives you an idea of what money was worth in the time of the Bible. It's the largest measure of money in the New Testament. It's the talent, it really represents not a lifetime of work, but 1 to 2 talents is a lifetime of work for a laborer in the New Testament. Because you're talking 33 years of work. Okay? So, here's my question. How much of my time is something worth?
What is the thing?
The thing matters, right? How much is my time worth?
That's also relative to you.
That's relative to you. So when you go out and you say or agree to work a certain job for a certain amount of money, you have chosen to exchange your time for that money, right? What if you made a bad deal?
That sucks.
You quit
That
your
sucks, thank you.
job?
That's pretty much it. Quit your job and get another one. Go negotiate better next
What
time.
about y'all know? Have y'all ever picked up a job and you're like, this
Yes.
is way more than we thought and is not worth what we're getting paid? Y'all do that. I know
That's
that's
right.
happened.
There have been other jobs that you've done. You're like, man, this is a breeze. We made great money on how long this took, right? The yard's a perfect rectangle. It has no potholes. You just run the motors back and forth, edge the thing, and you're done, right? Okay? You control what your time is worth. If you negotiate poorly, you negotiate poorly. That is what it is. The idea that you don't go out and find things that your time is worth, that's entirely up to you. Okay? But the second thing is, I'm going to give you a little insight into the way marketing works in our country. Okay? You walk into a store and they have a big sign that's usually yellow and looks all jagged on the edges, and what is it telling you?
Open?
No.
I was gonna say
On
McDonald's.
sale, right? 20% off, 50% off, 90% off, right? Does that matter?
Not really.
Why not?
Because it sells a price.
Well, because it's on the price. You're looking at, oh, I'm getting a discount for that thing, but what if that thing was way overpriced to begin with? Like, let's just say, for example, I'm willing to sell you one of my shoes right now for 30% off. Are you interested?
No.
Why?
Because it's nowhere close to my size.
Well, it's only one shoe.
You didn't want it to begin with.
You didn't want it to begin with.
But if you did
It's
want
used.
the thing.
Okay? It's not a complete pair. It's used. I didn't even tell you how much it was in the first place. I just told you it was 30% off.
It's small.
Might not even fit your foot. Some things are not worth what we pay for them regardless. But do you know what your time is worth? Can you determine all the variables in what your time is worth?
No.
Why not?
Because there's too many.
Well, what are the variables, Mike?
It's what you're working for, and then
Well, it's what I could make at this job or what I could make doing something else.
Yeah.
Right? My time is worth the best way I could spend it right now. So do I control the variables of my time? Pretty much.
Yep.
I take this job or that job. I have two jobs to choose from. One of them pays more than the other, and I feel like I can accomplish it. Take the better paying one. Or I have two jobs, and one of them is beyond my means to complete, so take the one that I know I can complete. Right? You control that. So I'm going to give you a little insight into one of the reasons that I'm wired a little differently. When I was in high school, I hauled hay. That was my job. I can tell you exactly how many bales of hay it costs for me to go out to eat, for me to go to a movie, for me to buy a TV, for me to buy clothes. Because I didn't care what the thing cost. I cared how much work it took to purchase it. It didn't matter if it was 50% off or 90% off. It mattered if I looked at that thing and said, ooh, that's a really nice TV, but I'm going to have to haul 1,200 bales of hay to pay for it. Is that really worth it? If you will look at the value of something not in currency, but in the means of exchange, and its actual value, how much of your time will it take to pay for it? You will make better decisions than about 3/4 of this country. Okay? The overwhelming majority of people look at what something costs in dollars, not what it costs in time. Okay? Give you another illustration. One of these days, you guys are going to grow up and buy a house. Right? And when you buy that house, you're probably going to take what?
money.
Money, a mortgage, a loan. Because maybe you don't have $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 laying around, so you take a loan. And you think, oh, this loan is only at 3, 4, 5, 6%, whatever it might be.
Holy crap.
You don't think about it. You maybe even look at the payment and go, I can afford that payment. But if you actually do the math of how much you're going to pay over the life of that loan, some people pay 2 and 3 times what that house is worth over the life of the house because they never total up what the payments cost. I bought this house for $300,000. I'll pay $300,000 to get it. But when you figure out all the interest over 30 years, it winds up you paid $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 to get it because that's how interest works. That is why when you look at something, you need to be comfortable exchanging your time for it. When you make a commitment to pay a loan, you are exchanging your time for that, not your dollars. Because you're going to pay it for 30 years unless you decide to pay it faster, in which case you're just contributing more time in the life of that note. Okay? So one thing I want you to understand is I really hope that you guys will at least consider detaching the money value from things and attaching a time value to things. Okay? So the question was, how much of my time is something worth? When I work, is this worth my time? When I spend, is this worth my time? And when I give, is this worth my time? Okay? So when you consider the way that you spend, the way that you work, the way that you give, even the way that you save, consider whether it is worth your time. instead of whether it's worth your money. Does that make sense? I'm trying to set at least a principle. This is going to build out, okay? This is one point in a series of many, but the first point is understanding money is an exchange of time. This right here is a phrase that people use a whole lot, but most people don't take it to that extreme where they know exactly how many hours a week they have to work to make their car payment, or how many hours a week they have to work to pay for their cell phone bill. They don't think about it. If you'll make that connection, you will be more successful in the way that you handle your finances. By the way, part of the reason that I do what I do, just this is a quick statistic, and we won't get into a logical conclusions section of this particular lesson because we're going to mix it in as we go. Anybody know what the number one cause of divorce is in this country?
Finance.
Financial problems. Anyone know what one of the top 5 reasons that people commit suicide?
Finance.
Financial problems. The way that people handle money has ruined their lives, ruined their relationships. It is very important to have a firm grasp on how to handle these things. So the first way that I'm going to help you combat against that is understanding that time is money. You're exchanging days or hours, days, and years of your life for everything that you acquire. Is it worth it? And when you go and volunteer, you're saying that that particular cause is worth as much of my time as going and working and making money. And when you can, you should, and you do. And when you can't, you can't. Okay? Some people have to work very, very hard just to make ends meet, just to get through life. Okay? They have less, and that's the way life works. But one thing that I hope will make you successful is understanding that time is money. All right, next one. Purpose of money. What can I do with it? What can I do with money? Give me some examples. Come on, everybody's favorite thing to do with money.
Feed your face.
Buy. Okay, we're going to broaden this out. You can spend it.
I was wondering what the caveat was.
Right? So that's one thing. Everybody loves doing that with money, right? What else can you do with money?
Invest.
Invest or save. What else? Give. Now, these are all outbound things. What are inbound things we do with money? We earn it. And there's one other one. Opposite of give is
Receive.
Receive.
I'm something to steal it. I guess that's earning. That would be a way of earning money.
I don't know. I don't know how to spell receive.
Yeah.
Let me right.
I said
Always on the fly, mix up the E and I. Microsoft Word has helped me with that. All right. So we can receive. It is EI. I knew it was. Okay. Anyway. Purpose of money. You can earn it, spend it, save it, give it, receive it. That's what you can do with money. So there's biblical principles for how to handle those things. What I need is I'm going to start over here. I want you to go to Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Hugh, I want you to go to Colossians chapter 3, and you ladies go there with him. Colossians 3. Land Ecclesiastes 9, verse 10. Okay? Here's the question while y'all are turning there. Is it right or wrong to earn money?
right.
It's right. Why?
Because God said so.
Okay. Let's back up a little bit. Remember last week when we talked about things that are morally right or wrong, not just because God said so? So if you remove God from it,
Okay.
on
I
an
didn't
objective
know we were
basis,
learning.
is it right or wrong to earn money?
There's no right or wrong.
Thank you. All right, we're going to pull from last week's lesson and remind ourselves that there's no right or wrong absent God, right? It may not necessarily be wrong to not go earn any money. Stealing may not necessarily be wrong. Just sitting around, again, without God, right? Or just sitting around and living off of other people. Like maybe the two of you just never move out of your parents' house. You just stay there forever and y'all continue supporting them.
Not happening.
Again, without God, it may not be right or wrong. All right? We're going to prove that earning money is right. Lane, Ecclesiastes 9, verse 10. How should we work? Go.
Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, for in the realm of the dead, where you are going, there is neither working nor planning, nor knowledge nor wisdom.
All right, so he says there, whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. Why? Well, he says, because where you're going, in the realm of the dead, you don't get to work anymore. So his whole premise, the premise of the Ecclesiastes writer, which again, I believe is Solomon, another discussion for another time. He says when you die, you don't get to work anymore. So while you have the opportunity to work hard. And the point at which you stop working is when you die, because you can't work there. Okay? So at least in Old Testament Israel, the concept of a retirement plan was a little sketchy. Okay? People worked until they couldn't. That's not a popular thing to say in my line of work, but it existed. Now, work hard. Why do we do that?
To become reliable.
To become reliable, okay. Why else? Why else should we work hard? Don't lean on God yet. We'll get there in a minute.
Get the best out of yourself.
Get the best out of yourself. Remember, again, we're talking about time is money. If you do a poor job,
You don't get as much money.
you don't make as much. If you do a good job,
You get better money.
generally speaking, you do better. Okay? Good workers tend to hold jobs better and longer and get paid better and longer. Okay? If you're a good employee, you have a higher likelihood of being successful. If you're a good business owner, you definitely have a higher likelihood of being successful. If you're a lousy business owner, the market will tell you that. Okay? So, we work hard because time is money. How I use my time and how hard I work in my time. One of the things, the biggest struggle in my life, I've only worked one job in my life. The rest of my time, I've been a business owner. But I had one job when I was in college, and I was an hourly worker. And the biggest problem I had was I would finish my work too soon. I would get in trouble because they would give me something to do, and if I finished it and didn't have anything else to do, I'd read the newspaper or just kind of walk around or whatever. I worked at a bank, and there's a reason I don't work in a bank anymore. But that is something they did not want, and my boss specifically told me, direct quote, just take longer to do your work. Okay? That I can't make that work in my head. That's why I don't work for other people. I can't just take longer to do the work. Time is money. If I can finish this job that you're paying me for in 3 hours instead of 4, you're better off because of it, and so am I. I can go do something else. Okay? So, something to be thinking about. Time is money. We work hard because if our time is valuable, we work as if our time is valuable. Okay? Taking 4 hours, like you guys, you mow yards. If you mow 4 yards in a day, do you make more money than if you mow 2?
Maybe.
Generally speaking, yeah, I mean,
Yes.
you get paid per yard, please. Explain to him how this works, okay?
Yes.
But if you mow more yards and get them done more quickly, you can make more money. Your time is more valuable. That's literally what we just defined, right? Work hard. Because where you're going, there is no more work. All right, we're going to pick up in Colossians where it takes that and applies God to it. Yes, ma'am.
What was his verse?
His was Ecclesiastes 9, verse 10.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Now we're going to Colossians 3. We're going to start in verse 22. Hugh, do 22, please.
Bondservants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in sincerity of heart fearing God.
What are bondservants? You don't know, do you? We've read that word our entire lives. We have no clue what it means, right? We'll get to defining it. Stick with me, okay? I just wanted to see if anybody in the room actually knew what a bondservant was. As opposed to a servant or maybe a slave or...
We'll start with a bond.
We're going to talk about the word bond. So, yeah. What's that?
Someone that works for somebody because they owe money.
More or less. It's a debt servant, an indentured servant, okay? So, for example, a bond is a loan. That's all it is, okay? In my line of business, we sell bonds, which are loans. That's one thing that we do. Another thing is indentured servitude. You are in debt or indentured to a person. You serve because you owe money. So bond servants, people who, and some people like to liken this to slaves, and there are some similarities there, but we'll talk about the difference at some point, either today or next week. But bond servants, when you work, do what? What do you say? Read it again, Hugh.
Obey in all things your masters according to the flesh.
Obey in all things your masters according to the flesh. Okay? Now, Paul's writing to the church at Colossae, and he says, hey, those of you who are bond servants, do as you're told. You are bound to this person. Megan, verse 23.
Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters.
All right. Now, that sounds a lot like what Lane just read a second ago, right? Work at it with all your heart. Well, Lane's verse was, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, right? What did it do here? It said you're going to work with all your heart as if...
As working for the Lord.
As working for the Lord. So what did it do, Louisa? It's your favorite thing. It invoked God, right? It wasn't an objective thing. Well, we work harder because our time is more valuable. This one, a bondservant is not paid. They are working off a debt. They took a loan and they agreed to work for so many years in exchange for that loan. That's what they agreed to do. And we'll talk about how bondservants worked in this time period. But it's a person who isn't getting paid. So it would seem like this is a run-out-the-clock scenario. I'm a servant for the next 10 years. Regardless of how much work I get done, I'm a servant for 10 years. But what Paul says is because of God, you still work hard. Even though you're not being paid, because you work for God, not for your human master. So now, is it right or wrong to earn money? Is it right or wrong to work hard? Now we get to invoke God and go, see, even God respects hard work. And God commands hard work, right? So now we have a right or wrong for it, right?
Why don't we get to invoke him now?
Again, we got to build it up, right? Solomon in Ecclesiastes didn't say, you work hard because of God. He said, you work hard because you're running out of time.
Oh.
Okay? So Solomon, very basic. Work with all your might because one day you'll die.
Well, that doesn't make sense without God anyway.
The whole point of Ecclesiastes is how nothing makes sense without God. But he's making the case that the world would make. We work hard because we only have so much time to work, right? Common phrase that I hear people use, I'll sleep when I'm dead. So I'm going to work hard while I'm here. I'm going to party hard while I'm here, or what have you. Absent God, that is the only line of logic. The only reason we work hard is because we only have so much to earn.
The only reason people work is so that they have money to pay for things.
Mm-hmm.
That's not because I'll die someday.
Well, it is in the standpoint of if I want to have the things that other people have, I don't have an eternity to earn them. I've got to work harder now to be able to have them. Right? So if I want a fancier car, I've got to work hard enough to be able to pay for it. Does that make sense? Or if I want a bigger house, I've got to work hard enough to be able to pay for it. And your question about your statement about long term, again, Solomon's point is you may die. Work harder because you don't know when you're going to die. If you want those things, work harder.
Right, but most people would say I'm working now.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I work is to serve my long-term goals first, or my short-term.
You would be amazed at the number of people that don't think that way.
I would say
What do they think?
Paycheck to paycheck. An incredibly large percentage, an overwhelming majority of people live paycheck to paycheck, which means they don't ever think past the next paycheck.
Yeah, so they're not
There is no
doing
long
it.
term.
They're
So-
not doing it for the long term. They're not
Correct.
doing it because I'll die one day and I won't be able to get that fancy car. They're doing
They're
it because I
Well,
need
no.
to
make
make
the car payment
But
because they
What,
bought the
what,
car
what I'm
payment.
saying though is the reason they live paycheck to paycheck is because they have more than they can afford. They can't afford to save because they spend every bit of what they make on what they want.
now.
So there's two concepts of paycheck to paycheck. One is they don't make enough to be able to support themselves. The other is they don't make enough to support the lifestyle they think they have, which is people who go and buy a car they can't actually afford, so they pay every last bit of what they have to be able to make that car payment because they bought more car than they could afford. They use debt to have all the things they want instead of work to have all the things that they want. Does that make sense? Okay? And it's one of the major contributing factors to my generation being terrible with money is we saw everything that our parents had and we went and bought all of it on credit. Our parents worked for 30 or 40 years to have those things, and we're like, well, they have a big house, why can't I? We'll talk about the inflation of the American dream one of these days, maybe next week or something. But the point that I'm making is that in Lane's point, we don't invoke God. We just say, you work hard because you're running out of time. In Colossae, Paul points to a group of people who do not get paid to work. They are working off a debt they have already spent. And he says, you still have to work hard because you work for God, not for men. It is morally right to work hard. Okay? There's a thing that's called, it's actually in vogue currently, what they call quiet quitting. It's a thing on Twitter right now, like presently. Quiet quitting is not working as hard as you can because you think you're underpaid. So people that have a salary position or an hourly position intentionally not working hard because they won't get their pay cut. Okay? That's a thing right now. What I am saying is that is morally wrong according to the Bible. Now, it may not be objectively wrong. They're still getting paid the same thing. Okay? So the whole thing, work hard because you may die. Well, if I can work less hard and make the same money, who cares if I die?
Wait, I'm confused if we're talking about God or not.
Okay, when we're talking about God, the case is work hard no matter what. That's what Paul tells the church at Colossae. Even people that don't get paid have to work hard. Right? So, let's use this as an example here. If you're a volunteer for something, how hard should you volunteer?
Are we including God?
We're going to Caritas and sorting clothes. Should we work hard at it?
Does God exist?
Yes.
Okay.
Louise is so distraught that God doesn't exist in some of these scenarios. In a scenario where God exists, when we, as Christians, go volunteer at Caritas, do we work hard?
Yes.
Yes. Why?
Because the Bible says
Because
so.
the Bible says so. Because God wants that. Because God says, even when you're not being paid, work hard. Right?
Mhm.
Let's go to Lane's example. We're in a world where God doesn't exist. Should we work hard?
Who
mean,
cares?
Who cares? Work hard if you want more.
A lot of the
But-
time it gets you ahead.
Sure. And the Ecclesiastes writer will also say if you have enough to be satisfied, that's good enough, because the more you have, the more you'll worry about it, and somebody else gets it when you die. The other case, again, we should do a study of Ecclesiastes sometime, because it spends 11 out of 12 chapters talking about the way the world exists without God, and how everything is meaningless, including work and money and wealth and relationships. All of it's meaningless without God. It's a great study. Anyway. All right, let's get back into the class we're having today. Colossians chapter 3, verse 23. You just read it, okay? Bondservants, work hard because you work for God, not your masters. Edie, verse 24.
Since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ who you are serving.
So you know you will receive an inheritance. Now, wait a minute. We talked about there's only so many ways you can make money, right? And there were only 2 ways we could bring money in. Where's my purple one? Okay. What were the 2 ways that we could bring money in?
Earn and receive.
Earn and receive, which I misspelled, but you're going to ignore that. What did he say you're going to do with that inheritance? You will
Receive.
Here's why you work hard. Because God's giving you an inheritance. God has asked you to work hard because he is giving you an inheritance. Now, what's the inheritance that God gives us?
Heaven?
Heaven, eternal life. Okay? What's the value of that? Could you put a price on it?
Not really.
No.
Why not?
Because we can't earn it.
Because we can't earn it. But, remember what money is worth?
Time.
Time. What's unique about eternal life?
It's
Infinite time.
Infinite.
It's an unlimited amount of time.
So it's an unlimited amount.
So it's an unlimited amount of money. You cannot place a value on eternity because in every concept that we understand about worth, it is literally invaluable. Does that make sense? Again, the time is money thing really plays in a bunch here. Eternity has an unlimited value because it's an unlimited amount of time. And so God says, while you have a limited amount of time, work hard because I'm going to give you something that is beyond value. You literally could not work hard enough to have it because it has no value. Does that make sense? Could you ever work enough years to pay off an infinite amount of time?
No.
No.
You could work for an infinite.
If you could work for an infinite amount of time, but what do we know about ourselves?
Well, if we're already going to be working for an infinite
don't
amount of time,
die.
why would there be a point in...
There wouldn't be a point. But
If you're gonna
Proverbs
receive
writer
it,
made it pretty clear about what an infinite amount of time is like. In the grave where you're going, nobody works. Even in the world without God, the proverb or the Ecclesiastes writer says, the world where you're going, nobody works. In the realm of the dead where you're headed, nobody works. So you're going to work a finite period of time in exchange for, Paul says, an eternal inheritance, something beyond value. All right, that was 24. Louisa, verse 25.
Anyone who does wrong will be repaid for their wrongs, and there is no favoritism.
Anyone who does wrong will be repaid for their wrongs. What's he talking about? What would be wrong in this scenario?
To not work as hard as you can.
Not working. Choosing to not work with all your might. Now, we'll get into some nuances about people that are unable to work, but the notion of people being unwilling to work is nonsense in a world where God exists. Okay? Now, here's the other side of this. All right, so that's the first part. Work as hard as you can as if working for God. I'm going to finish out the point of the purpose of money, and we'll pick up the rest next week talking about stewardship of money. So, we talked about work as hard as you can, Ecclesiastes 9:10, as if working for God, Colossians 3:22 through 25. You work to provide for yourself, 2 Thessalonians 3:6 through 12. Here's what Paul says there. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of it. He says, if you don't work so that you can eat, you should be cast out. Okay? That was 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 6 through 12. You guys can go read it. But Paul says, when I came to you, I gave you an example of how to work. I worked when I was among you. I was not a burden on anyone not because I wasn't entitled to anything from you, because as a preacher, I was entitled to anything that I asked of you. But at the same time, I wanted to give you an example of how you should be. So you should follow that example, and if anyone won't work, he should not eat. Okay? That's what he says in 2 Thessalonians 3, verses 6 through 12. Second of all, you work to provide for yourself, you work to provide for your family. Okay? 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 5 through 8, he says that when there are widows in the church who can't provide for themselves, let them go to their own families first. Their children should learn to support them first. And if they don't have children that can support them, then the church will. So when we talk about the quote-unquote welfare system within the church, it's family first, then the church. Okay, so you work to be able to provide for those in your family who cannot. Lastly, we have elderly parents. Mark chapter 7, verses 9 through 13. Jesus talks about how honor your father and mother is binding even when they are old. And when people say that what they would have given their parents, instead they have given to God, they are violating the command of God. So Jesus, through that explanation to the Pharisees, says these people are supposed to provide for their parents in their old age. And they're not because of a tradition that you made up. In order to carry out God's command, they have to go back and provide for their parents. So, you work to provide for yourself, for those of your household who cannot, and for your elderly parents. Did you a favor there? They heard that. Okay? Last one. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 28. You work hard so that you have something to give. And in this case, it's talking about giving to those within the church who do not have enough. Okay? So, Ephesians 4, verse 28 says, let him who steals, steal no more. Rather, let him work with his hands, doing that which is good, that he may have something to give. So, we work hard so that we have something to give. You work hard because you work for God. You work hard to provide for yourself. You work hard to provide for your family. And you work hard to have something to give. Does that all make sense? Okay? We will pick up on the why do we give next week because this has run a little long. I was confident this class would take more than one class period. Again, I appreciate you guys listening. If y'all have questions, let me know. Okay? All right, part 2 next week.
What's the last book you said? Ephesians?